Welcome back to Starkiller Base. Today we have the featured game from round 1 of our Black Knight Games February 2017 winter kit. On the left we have Chris playing Grievous Dooku, and on the right we have myself, John Gobeil, playing Jango Bala Trooper. This tournament was a bit of a trek. Took about an hour and 20 minutes to get there, but I heard that they were going to do a top 4 and a finals, so I figured it would be a great way to get a lot of nice coverage for the channel. So out I went. So it looks like Chris won initiative, and he's taking the Emperor's Throne Room as the active battlefield, which is not what I wanted to see, unfortunately, because I know he's gonna probably have the Holocron suite in there and lightsabers and that sort of thing, and most of his upgrades will have specials, whereas I don't have very many on mine at all. Given that it's a 2-character deck that I'm playing against, I figured the Balatik's not going to do all that much work and that Jango is going to be the big threat, so I put my shields on Jango. I really want to kill Dooku first to turn off all the spotted blue character and blue character only stuff, but Grievous's dice are so much more dangerous right at the start. So Chris plays Tactical Mastery, rolls in Grievous, hoping to get a big swing. He only got a 2 and a blank, but he gets to resolve that immediately without me being able to do anything about it, so he puts 2 damage into Balatik, and I put an F11D on Jango. I didn't bother to react with Jango there since I hadn't gotten an upgrade out on him yet. So Chris uses his last resource to play Dug in on Grievous, which is not what I was hoping to see. I was trying to figure out whether to switch over to Dooku in this case or not, because they now effectively probably have about the same number of hit points. But it all depends on how many modified damage sides you see. So I play out a Hunker Down on Balatik since he's shown him to be the target there. May not last very long since it's a heavy melee deck, but why not? Chris rolls in Dooku and gets 1 focus, which is kind of scary with a Grievous, and then I react with Jango and I get a resource and a +1 range damage. I take my action to take a resource. Chris turns Grievous's die into a 2 melee. I play He Doesn't Like You to remove it because I'd like to keep my Hunker Down there. And then Chris claims. And thankfully this turn he didn't have any upgrades to use that claim ability on. So I roll in Balatik, and I get a 1 ranged and a blank. I roll in the first door Stormtrooper, and I get a 2 ranged. I Hunker Down on Balatik. So I can take as many actions as I want here since Chris has already passed. So now it comes down to this. Do I put 3 damage into Dooku or Grievous?
Seems like Grievous is the obvious choice here.
Grievous is definitely a bigger threat right now, but Dooku can become a bigger threat as the game progresses. And I can turn off probably 9 of his cards or so. So I resolve the 3 damage into Dooku. He discards 1 to block 1 of the 2 range damage, and then I do the second damage. And he discards yet another card, so I am chewing through his hand, but unfortunately putting 3 damage into Dooku and only taking 1 is really unfortunate. So I think that I realized I probably should have put the damage into Grievous. At least I could get rid of his shields. So I discard the Dug in and draw back up because I realize that he's probably going to be claiming the battlefield faster than me, especially if he doesn't have any upgrades out. One of the problems with any deck that had Grievous in it is those pay sides. So when you play a 2-cost upgrade and roll in Grievous, if you don't have any resources, it's unfortunate when you roll those big damage sides and can't use them. So Chris plays out a Holocron on Grievous, and I play out a Jetpack on Jango. So I think Grievous is the big target here, definitely. And I'm probably making Jango into a big target, but of course Balatik has already taken some damage, so Chris may not be willing to change targets depending on how much damage he rolls out and that sort of thing. He rolls in Grievous, gets a Holocron special, a 2 melee, and a 1 resource. I react with Jango. I get a +2 ranged, a +1 ranged, and a +1 resource. And then I use Disarm to get rid of his Holocron. I just need to explain to him that it gets rid of the Holocron, not just removing the die and putting it back on Grievous there. So Dooku rolls in, gets a 1 resource. I Hunker Down. Want to get that shield on Balatik so that if he does the 2 melee, he doesn't take out my Hunker Down. Chris takes 2 resources, so he's got 4 now. Oh, it looks like I didn't actually tell Chris that he needs to remove the Holocron yet. Hopefully I catch that. I roll in Balatika, I get a focus and a resource. Disarm is a really interesting card against holocron decks. If you can get that disarm in hand, particularly with Jango, you roll in. It doesn't matter what ranged or melee damage side you have, as long as it's ranged or melee damage. It can be modified or otherwise. You can get rid of that holocron and discard it so that they can't get their free upgrades out.
Don't forget the holocron is gone. Discard it. It's not. It doesn't remove the die.
So there we go. I was just pointing out to him that disarm actually removes the upgrade itself. So the holocron should be in the discard pile and the die should be gone. Disarm's a great little card. I tried to put it in a Han Rey deck, and then I realized that when you're running the Starship Graveyard, all your opponent does is claim the battlefield and put whatever they disarm back on top of their deck.
I'm going to. I tried. I'll play cannon fodder, remove that die, and put.
So I play cannon fodder, remove Grievous's 2 melee damage, put it on the first order Stormtrooper. Chris claims, and now I have free reign here. So I can do at least 4 damage, it looks like, because of that focus. I put a DH-17 out on the first order Stormtrooper. So I think I'm setting myself up here to at least focus Jango's die into damage. So the first order Stormtrooper rolls in. He gets a 2 range and a 1 range. So I've got 5 range damage showing there. I can focus Jango's die into 2 more ranged, which puts me at 7 range damage. I'm slightly lamenting putting 3 damage into Dooku last round.
Yeah, that's true. I'm going to play Hunker Down.
So I focus Jango's die into a 2 ranged. I put out a Hunker Down and take a shield. So Balatika is fully decked out here.
Yeah, I'll do this into Grievous.
And then I do all the damage into Grievous. If I had put the 3 damage into Grievous the first round, then Grievous would only have 3 hit points left.
He would look a lot
I
better.
mean, he's not losing a lot of upgrades since he's got the redeploy and the lightsaber, but getting rid of Grievous's dice is not something that I'm sad to see.
And then I'll pass.
So I pass and we start the next round here. So it looks like Chris has spent a lot of his resources on events and that sort of thing, whereas pretty much all of mine have gone into upgrades. So my board state is looking a lot better than his at this point. But I've seen things turn around pretty fast in this game, so don't get too confident. Grievous rolls in, 3 melee for 1, a 2 melee, and a lightsaber special. I react with Jango, and I get a blank, a +2 ranged, and a +2 ranged. I had the potential to kill Grievous on that swing if I got the 2 ranged on Jango.
I will pay 1 and flank that die.
I pay 1 and I flank the 3 damage side. I figure I might as well minimize the damage. I realize that I could have flanked the 2 and then he'd spend a resource, but I'd like 1 less damage on my characters. So Dooku rolls in, gets a 2 melee. So he's got 4 damage out there, plus 2 unblockable. I roll in the first order Stormtrooper, and I get a 1 range and a 1 range. That's really good to see. That way he can't just remove 1 of my dice and turn off my modified sides.
Spend a resource to play all in.
So he pays 1 for all in, which is an interesting include in a Grievous Dooku deck. And of course we're going to see its power here.
4 damage, 10 puts him at 6, and then last one. Right?
So it looks like he's putting the 4 melee damage and the unpreventable damage into the first order Stormtrooper and getting rid of those unmodified range damage sides, which is not a bad call.
You've got a lot of blue.
I do. Well, that was next action Grievous would be dead. So.
Especially since Grievous would have been dead in 1 action otherwise. So I roll in Balatika, I get a blank and a shield. So if he's got something like Feel Your Anger here, he can completely neuter my turn. Because I've got 2 blanks there.
Pay 1. Feel your anger to discard
Yep. And there it is. I must have remembered that one. I don't have any specials on my dice, so there's no point in claiming for that ability. I go for the reroll. I get a blank, a shield, and a 1 melee. Chris puts out a data pad on Dooku. He's probably not got anything left to do right now, so the question is, do I want to reroll and try to get some more damage in here, or... There we go. Pay 1 for a backup muscle. It's kind of interesting because the Jango Battle Trooper deck, it has Jango in it, but I don't find it particularly fast. There's so many control cards and backup muscles and hunker downs and that sort of thing. I guess you could play it fast if you want to, but in this particular case, I'm playing it rather slow and just trying to survive here. So I take a shield on Jango, so both my characters are fully decked out for shields, and then I put 1 damage into Grievous and pass. And forgot my backup muscle, I guess.
Oh, I forgot my backup muscle. Whoops.
In any other setting, I would just
No, it's no problem, man.
So unfortunately, Chris hasn't used his claim ability on his battlefield to any large effect yet. But it's just maybe because he doesn't have those dice out yet, the upgrades that he needs with the specials. I do have specials on Jetpack and F11D now, so I have the potential to claim early to use it. He rolls in Grievous, gets a +2 melee, 2 melee, and a blank. I react with Jango and roll out a 1, a +2, and a 2. And I do 5 damage into Grievous to kill him. So that was very lucky of me. He redeploys the lightsaber over to Dooku. And now there's only 1 character to deal with. But it is far from over, as you've seen with Dooku before, probably. The question is,
As long as he's not staring at me with those
does Dooku now start hitting Jango or Balatik? Jango is the much bigger threat right now, especially when there's only 1 character left. So he rolls in Dooku, he gets a datapad special, a resource, and a resource. So that lightsaber's got the 2 unblockable damage, so I need to be careful of that, especially when he can claim the battlefield and trigger it at any time. I've seen people running the Emperor's Throne Room, roll out first action, roll out a Mind Probe, and get a blank on it or something like that. Their opponent has 5 cards in hand, but one of their characters has 5 hit points left. They roll in a character, and then the person that rolled out the Mind Probe, second action, claims the battlefield, resolves the Mind Probe to kill a character, and just foregoes the entire rest of their turn for it, and it's actually worth it. So Chris took 2 resources. I roll in Balatik, and I get a blank, and a 1 range damage. Chris plays out the Power of the Dark Side, which is a really interesting card when you've got the data pads and holocrons in your deck, since they have 2 blanks. So I reroll, I get a focus and a special on the hunt there. He uses Power of the Dark Side, rerolls the datapad, and misses that ability on it. So I can focus the On the Hunt into a damage, and then do 2 damage to Dooku at best this turn, it looks like. And then, of course, the backup muscle. If I remember it this time. The key to taking down Dooku, as I've said before, is doing large single hits. If you start pinging him with 1 range damage over and over again, he can discard his hand, basically, and take nothing. But if you hit the guy for, 6 range damage at a time, he can only take 1 damage off of that with his ability. So I'm doing 2 damage into Dooku here. Here's the option to discard 1 card and take 1 damage instead of the 2. So he discards Enrage and takes 1 damage. And then I backup muscle a damage into Dooku. One thing about backup muscle is if you're doing unpreventable damage to Dooku, like with a lightsaber special or something like that, you can still trigger his ability to give him a shield even though you can't block the damage with the shield. With backup muscle, because the damage is moved, it's never actually dealt, so Dooku does not have the option to trigger his ability off of it. So we got a new round starting here. I guess Abandon All Hope's not a particularly helpful card against a Jango deck like this, where it runs 1 and 2 cost upgrades. You never really have more than 2 resources, so generally you would choose to get rid of your resources, roll in whatever you've got, and then get some more resources to play what's in your hand here. I just moved Grievous out of the way there because he's an intimidating dude, and sitting on the board there looking like he's kind of alive makes me nervous.
Dug in.
Okay.
Okay, wait, do I have to squat for that?
So Chris plays dug in and puts 3 shields on Dooku.
I'm gonna roll in Balatik.
I roll in Balatik. And I get a blank, a +1 ranged, and a resource. So those hunker downs are not doing a whole heck of a lot for me at this point. I haven't seen which target Chris has changed to, but I can always use them for something like arm to the teeth. Just discard them to do damage. Chris plays out a force throw, which will make me connecting range damage to modified range damage even harder. I do backup muscle into Dooku because I'd like him to activate Dooku first.
I'll run out of them real fast. Yeah.
I don't have a problem so much with that facing that deck with the other deck I run, but with this deck, yeah.
Roll in, Mr.
So here comes Dooku. He rolls a blank, a lightsaber special, a 1 melee, and a 2 disrupt. And I roll in Jango with my reaction. I get a 1 disrupt, a +2 ranged, and a 1 melee. So there's all those modified range damage sides and no actual range damage sides. The first order Stormtrooper is actually one of the best sources of unmodified range damage in my deck here. So it's kind of sad to see him gone. But such is life.
I'm gonna discard Tactical Mastery.
I discard my Tactical Mastery and reroll. And I get a shield, a +1 resource, a resource, and a +2 range. So we got more modified range damage and no range damage sides to resolve them with.
2 unblockable to Balatik.
Chris resolves the lightsaber special and puts 2 damage into Balatik, and it's unblockable, so it goes through those shields there.
Oh, round 2 already?
Balatik could go down even with 3 shields because of the power of the dark side there and the lightsaber specials, so I need to be careful of that, but I'm sort of banking on Jango here over Balatik anyway as being my primary source of damage. So I need to be careful of him claiming and resolving a force throw to throw one of my dice into me. So if I reroll and get a black side, he can just claim force throw the black side into me, and then I'm back to square one again.
Smack Balatik for 1.
So Dooku does a damage into Balatik. I hunker down to get the shield back. He rerolls the data pad with the power of the dark side and hits that blank, so Balatik now has 2 hit points left and could be dead from a lightsaber special or a power of the dark side next round.
Discard Fight Dirty.
I discard Fight Dirty and reroll. Maybe I should have just played it, taken the 4 damage and called it a day. It might be difficult to get 4 damage out of these dice with the force throw out there. So I reroll. I get a +2 ranged, a 1 melee, an F11D special, a +2 ranged, and a blank.
Remind me, if I force
We're gonna do
throw,
4 damage to Vader's
can I
face.
do it to like a +2? Yep. Is that still a value of 2?
Yep.
Alright. I'm gonna claim the battlefield and force throw.
So Chris claims and force throws the jetpack into Balatik.
I'm going to hunker down on Balatik. I'm going to.
I think with the unpreventable damage that he has in his lightsaber and his power of the dark side, I probably would have just force thrown it into Jango, because that way Jango doesn't have the ability to get those shields back from the hunker downs,
I know, right?
and he could kill Balatik with either one of those. So I put out a hold-up blaster over top of that hunker down. And now it's a question of what I should do here.
Discard Jetpack. Reroll.
Interesting. I probably should have just kept that F11D special. I was looking to reroll to get the special on the hunt there.
You can't discard because you have
So I take a resource.
can't gain any more shields.
I do 1 damage into Dooku,
Having 3 shields.
and he can't use his ability to discard
But who knows?
because he has 3 shields already. So I guess technically he could discard to gain a shield, but he wouldn't get the shield, so it would just be a waste of a card. So Dooku may look like he's in trouble here, but I still think it's anybody's game at this point. Balatik may be dead in 1 or 2 actions for all I know. Rolling Dooku, use Power of the Dark Side to reroll that data pad, and Balatik is dead, potentially. He rolls in Dooku, gets a blank, a 2 disrupt, a 1 shield, and a 1 melee. And I am thinking about reacting with Jango. So I react with Jango. I get a blank, and a jetpack special. And for my second action, be really nice for an arm to the teeth or something like that. Get rid of the hunker down and the on the hunt. So I resolve the jetpack special. I remove Dooku's die, and I don't get a shield because Jango already has 3 shields. In hindsight, I probably should have rolled in Balatik and then forced him to use the Power of the Dark Side or claim the battlefield and do the lightsaber special to get rid of his dice. So Chris is a little confused here. He just played Feel Your Anger and told me I had to discard my hand or all my resources. So he switched it over. He's got Abandon All Hope there, which is I have to get rid of my hand or all my resources. It's never an easy choice there.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, I don't really need 4 resources in this deck, and there may be some good cards in my hand that I want to keep. Also, I may be in threat of being milled. I don't think so at this point, but Dooku's still rather alive, so I choose to get rid of those resources instead. I can always override upgrades and play 0-cost events and stuff like that potentially, so gonna keep my hand safe there.
I'm going to use 3 damage against Vader's face.
I'm gonna play Arm to the Teeth. Remove 3 upgrades from
So I play Arm to the Teeth. I get rid of 3 upgrades from Balatik to do 3 damage to Dooku.
What's that? I said all you need to do is claim the battlefield.
I knew that Balatik could have been dead in 1 or 2 actions if he claimed the battlefield and resolved the special on the lightsaber or used the Power of the Dark Side to reroll the data pad. Maybe I should not have gotten rid of the holdout blaster and just let it redeploy over to Jango. The 3rd damage isn't really doing anything that spectacular. So Chris resolves the Power of the Dark Side, rerolls that data pad, and gets the +1 resource again. I roll in Balatik. I get a focus and a shield, and Chris is probably going to be forced now to claim the battlefield just to kill Balatik off here, but we'll see. The data pad and the force thrower are not going to do all that much, and all I've got dice-wise after that would be Jango and the F11D. Looks like he discards a Force Strike and rerolls, gets a blank and a +1 resource, so definitely not what he was looking for.
I will focus this to...
He gave me the chance to resolve a die on Balatik, so I used the focus to set Jango's die to a 2 ranged.
Man, I'll hope it's pretty rough. But I guess that's the idea, right?
I am going to...
Well, I suppose I'll claim and do the...
So Chris claims and resolves the lightsaber special to kill Balatik. So Dooku's got 6 hit points left, and my Jango has 13 effective hit points, so I do feel like I have the upper hand at this point, but he's got a bigger upgrade suite,
Oh,
and Dooku's ability to discard cards can always make it a close game. So I'm doing 2 damage to Dooku. He discards 1 card, takes the damage. I back up muscle and put him up to 6 damage, so he only has 4 hit points left.
I will. Just get scary. Probably got me, but...
And then I discard the F11D and get greedy.
Roll, give it 1 try. Why not?
There's a few usable sides on that. Actually, only 2. So I got the resource,
What will I do with that resource?
and then I'll pass.
Nothing. I'll pass.
One thing about any deck that Dooku has in it, especially with the Holocron suite, is that you can actually change your strategy around and mill your opponent down. With all the discarding and reroll you'll have to do when your opponent is blanking your dice and force choking them and that sort of thing. It does eat through your deck pretty fast, and then Dooku's got those natural 2 discards. Sometimes I've seen people play resolve a Dooku die with Power of the Force for 4 discard and dump somebody's hand. So Dooku rolls in, gets a resource, a 2 disrupt, a shield, and a resource.
I will think about whether or not I want to react. I will not react. I'll play 2 for a holdout blaster.
I play out a holdout blaster on Jango before rolling him in with his reaction. I get a 2 range for 1, a 2 shield, a blank, and a +1 resource. So if he's got Intimidate, he can get through my shields pretty quickly. But I haven't seen him play one yet. Looks like he plays Feel Your Anger and removes the holdout blaster die. So I have the opportunity here to claim and use the claim ability to change either the jetpack to the special or the F11D to the special and get some damage or some die removal in there. I don't need to do that yet because he's got plenty of dice with varying sides out there. So I re-roll some dice. I get a 2 range for 1, 2 ranged, and a 1 disrupt. The 1 disrupt isn't all that interesting, but when your opponent only has 1 resource left, sometimes taking it away is actually a really good choice. So there, Chris disrupts my resource. Now I can't resolve my F11D die, so I'll disrupt his resource. See how he likes it.
Yeah, you like I don't. I know, right? This is what you're doing.
I think he's discarded both of his enrages that he had in the deck already, so he can't get a resource back that way, but he's got plenty of resources on the board there. So he uses the power of the dark side, rerolls that data pad, and gets a resource again. And I put in 2 damage into Dooku. He discards a card. Tactical Mastery wouldn't have been doing him much good without Grievous anyway. And Dooku now has 3 hit points left. Instead of messing around with rerolling here, I could always just claim and set the F11D die to a special to do 2 damage. Chris rerolls, gets a 3 melee for 1, a 1 resource, a +1 resource.
2 cards left.
Looks like I passed.
I'll pass.
Okay, so we're gonna pay a resource.
Chris takes 2 resources.
2 additional actions.
Not sure what I had in my mind there. Maybe he doesn't like you or something.
Pain drain for 1 action.
I'm gonna claim.
So I claim. I set the F11D to a special so that he has to do 2 damage to Dooku.
Yeah, I would assume so. So it's basically it's 2 damage and then you can discard 1 to block.
So in this case, it's 2 damage at one time, and he could discard a card to block 1 of it.
Pay a resource. Take up 2 additional actions.
So Chris puts 3 damage into Jango and then passes, and we have the start of what may be our last round here.
Then I have 1 action remaining.
If I have a arm to the teeth, I can end it first action here. Just get rid of the 3 upgrades off of Jango, and he can't block more than 1 of it. So he overwrites his 4th throw with a Mind Probe.
I will pass again.
I would have been inclined to overwrite the lightsaber maybe, but I guess the lightsaber does have some
Upgrade.
good damage there.
I hope it's a mind probe.
Okay. So he overwrote the lightsaber with the Mind Probe as well.
I will
I guess I passed
pass again.
because I want to use Jango's reaction to roll in first. This could get ugly real fast. So he rolls in Dooku, gets a blank, a Mind Probe special, a 2 disrupt, and a 1 melee. I react with Jango and I roll in. I get a 2 shield, a 1 resource, a 1 melee, and a +2 ranged. So I only needed to get 2 damage out there and I didn't get it. But
My dice to remove
Pay 1 to electroshock.
so I electroshock the Mind Probe die away because I don't really feel like taking 4 or 5 damage right now. He uses power of the dark side to reroll that data pad. In theory, it should work really well. He's only hit it once, I think, in the 4 or 5 times he's used it, so it's just bad luck. But on the other hand, he's rerolling the data pad for free and potentially getting usable sides. So So I discard and reroll. I get a jetpack special, a 2 ranged, a +2 ranged. So if he doesn't have anything to control that Jango die, then unfortunately it's over here. So it looks like that's the GG. Thanks for watching. And we've got round 2 coming up in a few days. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and like the video so you can support us and we can continue to provide you with Destiny content. Thanks for watching, everybody.